This is the User Adoption Podcast with your host, Henrik de Gyor.
Who are you and what do you do?
My name is Jeff Patton. I'm right now a consultant. I work with companies that are trying to adopt a more product-centric model. Before that, I've been a product manager and I've been involved in agile development a lot. So I work in this intersection between agile development and product thinking.
How are you involved with user adoption?
As a product manager, I was responsible for my own users and user adoption, and there's a longer story there. But right now, as a consultant and a coach and a teacher, I'm working with product managers and people on product teams and helping them understand what the topic means. I teach metrics. I teach people to do proper user interviews and observation, and it's helping others to be aware of it.
Jeff, what are the biggest challenges and successes with user adoption?
The people that I work with tend to pay more attention to what users have to do with their software or what their software does. They don't think of what happens before users start doing what they're doing, how users find the product, how users make a decision to start using it. If just using the software is part of people's jobs, the finding and deciding may not be what users need to do, but the learning and incorporating into their work practice is something they do. And what I find by working with product teams is they oftentimes don't think of that part. They don't think of how users are going to have to incorporate it into their work, how their users are going to have to change the way they work in order to use it. And consequently, I spend a lot of time with people debugging why adoption isn't happening very fast.
Jeff, what advice would you like to share with people working on improving user adoption?
Like I mentioned, I focus an awful lot on people. I work with a lot of people to actually get them to start focusing on improving user adoption. The advice I give to people that are working to improve user adoption, first off, they're already there. They're already focusing on it. The most important advice I'd give to people doing this work is advice I give to people doing any product-centric work, and that's actually to directly observe people. There's a lot we can learn from data, and if we look at how users use our product, especially as they're going through some adoption path, data will give us a lot of good numbers about where people drop off and why, or where people look like they're challenged and why. But there's an old saying from a friend of mine that data is exhaust, not fuel, that data will tell you what happened, but not why. It's observing, it's being there face to face while users are struggling to use something that helps you learn more. It's being there face to face while users are going through an adoption process. Now, I realize we're talking about adoption really broadly here, and that's partly why I'm struggling to come up with examples. Adoption for a consumer-centric product is very different than adoption for a B2B or a business product. Adoption for a product I use to do my job is different than adoption for an entertainment product or a game. Sometimes it's really tough to be there while people are doing something, because adoption is not a sit down and figure out how to use it process that takes a few minutes or a half hour. Sometimes adoption is something that takes weeks or months. Adoption for some of the product companies I work with for a B2B product is, well, the product serves a number of people engaged in automating a business process. So we're talking about a number of job roles and a business process that may span days or weeks, and observing starts to get tough. But first piece of advice is be there. Let me go more narrow. And again, because adoption for different products means different things. I do work an awful lot with companies that build business software that are used by businesses, and where adoption and use of the product, again, the software spans a number of job roles and helps people engage in a process that takes a long time. One of the practices that I coach people in and coach teams in has been nicknamed a dress rehearsal. It came from something I used to do going back to 1999 and 2000. We was working with a company that was adopting a new warehousing system, and we were responsible for building this system. And every 45 days, we would come together and do what we called then a conference room pilot, or a CRP. We would have the business process mapped out on the wall. We had the software as much as was implemented then. Everybody took on a particular job role, and we used the software as if it was real or as if it was live. We're not the users. Some of us are subject matter experts. Some of us know how this process goes, but we step into the shoes of the user. And when we've got a process that may take a week and pass through a number of job roles, in a half day to a day, we can simulate the whole process end to end and simulate it using it real life work and feel what it's like to be them, feel what it's like to go through adoption. I work with a company that does software for SEC tax filing and for Sarbanes-Oxley compliance and for doing a quarterly SOX audit. It's something that's hard to observe. It's hard to see where the challenges with adoption are. But when we sit down and simulate it in a half day, we can see where it feels rough, see where it's a problem. And doing something like this, we've got people that are actors that perform in the job role that a person using it does, and people that are observers. This is where I hear engineers that normally work on product teams say, well, I thought that user interface was good until I had to sit down and do it over and over again, and I see how annoying it is. This is where you see people... This is where, what looks intuitive when you're looking at it without doing the job, but when you're engaged in doing the job, suddenly it's not so obvious. Suddenly the workflow feels broken. Suddenly you see all the hangups that make a product hard to start to use. I would kind of map things like conference room pilots and what's funny, working with a large bank, they started referring to these as dress rehearsals because they started feeling like a dress rehearsal for a play. That practice has become one of my bigger successes. Doing that kind of practice has helped a lot. It's helped product designers a lot. When people hear the word adoption, I think they often think of consumer products and adoption meaning people trying to compel people to use the product. Adoption is part sales and marketing. And for a UX person that says, I don't do it, I think they may be thinking, oh, that's sales and marketing stuff.
Yep, that's right. And I appreciate the fact that it's not, I mean, a consumer is a consumer, or a person is a person, but there's definitely different personas that use SEC software versus Spotify, to your point, for the most part. But at the end of the day, they're still people, even though there might be a different persona and different purpose or different problem to solve, right?
In teaching this stuff, I want people to understand the difference between a customer and a user, or a user and a chooser.
Yes.
Which I like. Yeah, look, if you're using SEC compliance software, the majority of users, in fact, almost all the users, are not the choosers. If you're using Spotify, you are both user and chooser. Failure to adopt on Spotify means I find a different product. Struggle with adoption if I'm an auditor in a large company doesn't mean I can't abandon. I have to come up with workarounds. I have to struggle. And ultimately, it sucks the value proposition out of the product.
Jeff, where can we learn more about user adoption and your work on the subject?
All right. I don't have any good. First, I wrote a book called User Story Mapping. And it's not about user adoption. User story mapping, because I live at this intersection between product thinking, user experience thinking, and agile development. Story mapping is a way to imagine, or not imagine, but map a user's journey, or we look at a user's journey through our product, and we use that to understand the product and break the work down. A story map is a way to think through the use of the product. My work is on story mapping, and I'm sure the listeners of this podcast may have heard of things like journey maps or even story maps as a tool to help product teams understand how users use their product. That's an excellent one, and that's what I've written on it. But it's not squarely about user adoption. Talking to you this morning has helped me start to wonder, where do I get information on user adoption? It seems to be a subject that I spend a lot of time worrying about, but not a subject that I have specific collateral to point people directly at. There may be a hole here.
That's fair. And that's the whole purpose of the podcast.
For more on this, visit useradoptionpodcast.com. Don't forget to please subscribe, rate, and review. And for a book about this, check out useradoptionbook.com. Tune in next week for the next episode. Thanks for listening.